Well, hello, everyone. It is good to see you. I'm Anne-Marie Green alongside Vladimir Duthier. As per usual, there's a lot going on, including, a pretty sort of surprising move by the Biden administration that may have a ripple effect within the Middle East, Vlad.
Yeah, indeed. The president is sending a sharp message to Iran after taking his first military action in office. The United States launched airstrikes targeting Iran-backed militias in Syria along the Iraq border overnight. Several key facilities were destroyed. An activist report more than 20 militants were killed. Pentagon officials say the move was payback for recent rocket attacks against coalition troops in the region. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke to reporters last night, and he defended the administration's decision.
We're confident in the target that we went after. We know what we hit. And we're confident that that target was being used by the same Shia militia that conducted the strikes. We're very deliberate about our approach, as you would expect us to be. We allowed and encouraged the Iraqis to investigate and develop intelligence, and that was very helpful to us in refining the target.
So it's unclear how these airstrikes will impact the president's plans to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal and establish communications with Tehran over American hostages. For more on this, we want to bring in Connecticut Congressman Jim Himes. He serves on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
So are you supportive of these airstrikes and the launch of these airstrikes? Do you believe it was the best move? And I guess more importantly, was Congress notified of this military action ahead of time?
Yeah, on the first part, it's a little hard to answer whether you're supportive. Look, it's one move on a fairly complicated chessboard. My suspicion is it's probably a smart move. And what I mean by that is that for a long time now, there's been sort of a low burn conflict with Iranian proxies, and not just in that part of Iraq and Syria, but also in Baghdad, where we've been struggling with Iranian-backed militias getting more and more aggressive. And so, look, every time we have a new president, I think the whole world, including the bad guys in the world, like the Iranian regime, wonder who they're dealing with. And, of course, the new president, Joe Biden, has been talking in the last couple of weeks about re-engaging in a negotiation with Iran. And in a very ugly part of the world, I think this was Joe Biden's way of saying, hey, we'll negotiate, but don't think for 1 second that you're going to push us around. And if you attack our people, as they did, there will be a significant cost to be borne.
Congressman, how do you see these airstrikes against these Iranian-backed militias impacting the Biden administration's plans to rejoin or resume the conversation about the 2015 nuclear deal, or maybe bring home American hostages, if you think it will have an impact at all?
Yeah, I think, the Middle East is a place where you negotiate from a position of strength, and where you make sure that the opponent that you're sitting across the table from understands that you're not a patsy, understands that they're not going to get anything over on you. And again, it's if you don't have the full layout, it's hard to say this was the smart thing to do. But, again, given that for the first time in 4 years, the president is saying, I will re-engage with the Iranians, and try to get back that nuclear deal, maybe even do a better deal. Very different, of course, from the last administration, where it was very clear that they simply wanted the regime to go away. I do think it makes sense to say, look, we're extending a hand of friendship, but don't think for 1 second that that means that you can take advantage of us. And if you go after us, we will be very, very firm and very tough in going after you. I think that's probably a good poker hand to have up against the Iranian regime.
Meanwhile, Congressman, President Biden held a phone call with Saudi King Salman yesterday. However, it's unclear if they discussed those new intelligence reports blaming the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. What's your take on the president's conversation with the king? What can you tell us about the report? And in your capacity as the House serving on the House Intelligence Committee, how important is it ultimately to find out exactly what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, given that it's put journalists' lives at risk all around the world?
Yeah, and look, I haven't yet seen the report, but I think it's going to tell us what we have known to be true from, very shortly after the moment that we learned that Jamal Khashoggi had been killed, and that is a very, very close involvement on the part of the Saudi regime. Relations with the Saudis are going to get a lot more complicated under Joe Biden, under President Donald Trump. The murder of this journalist outside of Saudi Arabia in Turkey, of course, the White House sort of didn't seem to mind. They didn't condemn it. And that, of course, puts journalists everywhere at risk. And it also sends a green light to the Saudi regime that, hey, we're going to turn a blind eye to that kind of behavior. There's a new sheriff in town, and Joe Biden has made it very clear that that's not okay. He's also made it pretty clear that we're going to rethink our support for the just appalling war that continues to rage in Yemen, with civilian after civilian being killed, and so relationships with Saudi Arabia are about to get more complicated because they don't any longer have a blank check. Now, I should say, look, the Saudis, Khashoggi in Yemen is on one side of the ledger. On the other side of the ledger is that they're an important partner of ours in fighting terrorism in the region. So, this is not a good guy, bad guy thing. But I am glad for those journalists, and actually just for basic decency and human rights around the world, that we're going to make it very clear that we will name and shame people who do appalling things like the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
So I take it then you are in favor of the administration's release of sort of guidelines when it comes to how the administration will deal with, a similar incident. Will deal with journalists who write for American publications being abused or killed elsewhere by foreign governments.
Yeah, I mean, you say guidelines. Look, you can't kill journalists. There's and you certainly can't do it because that journalist is writing things that you don't like. I mean, again, there doesn't need to be too terribly complicated a rule book. This is true of every regime on the planet, and there's some pretty nasty ones out there. You don't get to kill innocent people. You don't get to kill journalists. We as a country embrace. Even though the elected officials sometimes get a little irritated with the media, we embrace the concept that the media is a critical part of holding us accountable. And so as annoying as it may sometimes be to get asked those questions, we celebrate the role of the media. And no, nobody gets to harm or kill or jail journalists just because they don't like what those journalists are writing.
Let's take a look at some of the domestic issues that we're facing as a country, Congressman. The House now is expected to vote on President Biden's COVID relief bill today. This comes after the Senate's top advisor said the provision raising the federal minimum wage should be removed from the plan. Do you agree with the conclusion?
Well, so what's frustrating about this is that it's not a political conclusion, right? And yes, we should have a debate. I happen to support a national $15 minimum wage. That's not a crazy position. My own state of Connecticut is migrating to a $15 minimum wage. The very red state of Florida is voted overwhelmingly to move to a $15 minimum wage. So I don't think this is a terribly hard political issue, but what you have is a parliamentary issue in the Senate where this turns out to be one of those things that doesn't qualify to pass with 51 instead of 60 votes. So, look, I think in the next couple of days, it's not where I work. The Senate is more confusing and more complicated, but you're going to see a really serious debate, certainly inside my party, around whether, something that could make such a difference for so many Americans, that is raising the minimum wage for the first time in a generation, should be held up because of a parliamentary decision. I'm not sure how that's going to come out. But I will also point out that you don't even have unanimity in the Senate today on a $15 minimum wage. There's a few senators who, on the Democratic side, who have said they're not comfortable with it. So as much as I support it, as much as people around this country support it, the $15 national minimum wage has a ways to go yet.
Congressman, why hasn't the House Intelligence Committee been able to organize and hold meetings?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. I mean, I know part of the answer to that question, which is an awful lot of congressional business, of course, got sidelined by what happened on January 6th. It's now much harder to do business in the Capitol than it was before because it is an armed camp. And of course, after January 6th, we had the impeachment in the House and the trial in the Senate. So sadly, in an episode that did nothing good for anybody, we are a couple of weeks behind, I think, where we would like to be with the new president because of what happened in the month of January. Beyond that, I'm certain that the Speaker of the House and the Minority Leader are doing the work they need to do to reconstitute the committee.
So, Congressman, before we let you go, I just want to go back briefly to talking about these airstrikes. So just in understanding what our role in the Middle East is going forward, specifically as it relates to intelligence, you're supportive of these types of military actions. And I wasn't clear, maybe you said it, but were you informed leading up to the airstrikes, or were you informed by the Office of the President after?
So I was not informed, and to my knowledge, the broader Congress was not. Now, sometimes in these situations, what will happen is that the president or the president's people will inform congressional leadership. That's not unusual. All I can tell you is that I was not personally informed, and I think that's true of most of my colleagues. But
should
when
the
you
president,
say,
do you believe that the president of the United States, though, Congressman, should inform Congress, at least the congressional leadership, before undertaking military action? It was something certainly that others criticized President Trump for. Many presidents have been criticized in the past for undertaking this military action, and in recent decades, it's become more common for presidents to do these types of military actions and sometimes inform Congress after the fact. But are you hoping for a reset of that kind of decision making?
Yeah, it's a huge question, and it goes back, 50 and 60 years. As a general matter, there is no question that Congress needs to claw back its authority. It's in the Constitution. There's no ambiguity that Congress has the authority to declare war. And for too long now, Congress has dodged its duty to do so. And the president, by the way, has taken, and presidents of both parties over a long period of time have taken advantage of that fact. But look, the Constitution has that for a reason. So I think most people, at least in the Congress, are on the same page with me that we need to make sure that we go back to a place where hostilities are authorized by the Congress. Now, yesterday's action, of course, it's retaliatory. It's not a war, if you will. So I'm not going to say that, Congress should have met and approved the airstrikes yesterday. Even as I say, hey, if you're going to go military in the Middle East, be very, very careful, because we don't have a good track record of getting our stuff done militarily in the Middle East. But no, look, the larger issue is exactly right. Congress needs to reassert its authority in deciding when we're going to send young men and women into harm's way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, a strike like yesterday should be pre-approved by the Congress. The reality is that the president does need some room to react, to retaliate, to move quickly in a very, very limited way.
All right, Congressman Jim Himes, thank you.
Thank you.